When you think of the term speedrun, the Fallout series isn't exactly the first thing that comes to mind, with the most competitive speedrun being that of Fallout New Vegas, sitting far down the list of most ran games of all time, being placed a comfortable 251st overall. However, that doesn't mean the speedrun itself is a walk in the park. In fact, I would argue it's quite the opposite, with New Vegas being known within the Fallout speedrunning scene as the most optimized run of the series. Throughout the years, countless tricks and discoveries have been made that pushed the boundaries of Obsidian's creation, raising the skill ceiling to ridiculous points. But how did these discoveries come about, and what exactly did runners do to make this nearly 12-year-old game look so goddamn broken? Well, today we'll be recounting the various steps made throughout the years, encapsulating the entire history of Fallout New Vegas. With the world record being pushed that much lower and lower, this is the complete history of Fallout New Vegas Any%. Fallout New Vegas released on the 19th of October 2010, and with the success of Fallout 3 just 2 years prior, there was a lot of eyes focused on the new spin-off game that was being spearheaded by Obsidian Entertainment. What released was, for lack of better words, a buggy masterpiece. The game was filled to the brim with amazing stories, great side missions, and an absolute heap of bugs. However, over the next year or so, a majority of the bugs within New Vegas were slowly patched out, and it was within this small window of New Vegas' early days that the speedrunning scene began to take shape. Most early runs of New Vegas were not recorded and have unfortunately been lost to time, but it is worth noting down the times claimed by the early runners. Looking through Speed Demo's archive, we can see the early developments of New Vegas speedrunning take place, as only 8 days after the game's release, on October 27th, a user by the name Error1 claimed to have a 63-minute flat PB. Another 8 days later, Nocti had listed down a 41-minute and 3-second PB, followed by a runner named Striker, who set 3 back-to-back world records in the late months of 2010. His final time on the leaderboards was a 35-minute and 39-second PB, which was some pretty fast progress in the short span of the game's first 3 months. However, these runs were also claimed to have been performed segmented, meaning they were performed in parts and not all in one sitting, so unfortunately we must scratch them off the list for being obsolete. To arrive at our first official speedrun, which subsequently also has video evidence, we'd have to move forward 17 months later to July the 26th of 2012. This run was done in one sitting and was completed by a runner named Rebcart. I'm going to use this run to explain the speedrun route used in the early days of New Vegas' speedrunning scene, and also to briefly refresh your mind on what exactly you needed to do to complete the main quest line of Fallout New Vegas. So after starting a fresh new save, we're placed in Doc Mitchell's small, humble abode. Here, Rebcart simply skips past the name check and character creation screens before quick save quick loading the dialogue from Doc Mitchell. Every modern Fallout game has some form of dialogue skipping, whether it's the quick save quick load function in Fallout 3 and New Vegas, which skips separate lines of dialogue, or beating the fuck out of people in Fallout 4. You can skip dialogue in these games and save a lot of time. In New Vegas, this is used quite a lot whenever you're not in a one-on-one dialogue window, which is when you're given these little prompts at the bottom. Whenever you don't see this and someone's talking, you can quick save quick load to skip it. Rebcart then heads over to the Vitmatic Vigor tester to take 1 strength, 1 perception, 10 endurance, 10 charisma, 8 intelligence, 1 agility, and 9 luck. In my opinion, the only 2 important special stats here are the 10 charisma for more speech skill and 8 intelligence for more skill points on leveling up. He then pushes Doc Mitchell over to his therapy chair before taking speech, survival, and medicine, and leaving with 0 traits. After finally breathing fresh air again, Rebcart heads northeast to Goodsprings Cemetery for later use before heading east to Hidden Valley for again later use. He then heads northeast before discovering Black Mountain whilst being interrupted by Neil, a local from the area. He does try to skip talking to Neil by attacking in the air. By attacking and being stuck in an animation, you're unable to engage in dialogue. This can be used to avoid conversations when they're not needed, but Rebcat fails this and loses some small time. He then fast travels to Black Mountain, the location he just discovered, which skips running north across this small path along the mountainside, before again heading east to discover a substation being ran by the NCR for, you guessed it, later use. After grabbing a small plethora of outside locations, Rebcat dashes straight north to Camp McCarran to enter the strip. I've mentioned this a fair few times on this channel, but if you want a quick and reliable way to enter the strip of New Vegas, you can simply waltz onto the monorail ran by the NCR and quickly get on board, skipping a small confrontation and delivering you to the centerpiece of this wild wasteland. Here, Rebcat runs into the White Glove Society to formally meet with Mortimer, one of the heads of this fine establishment, before heading back through the casino and leaving. Now is a perfect time to explain the ending that runners are attempting to obtain in this run, and what exactly is needed to acquire said ending. See, the fastest way to beat New Vegas has always been known to be the Yes Man ending. The main two conditions for this ending are two separate quests, aptly named Change in Management and Side Bets. Change in Management is the removal and subsequent replacement of Mr. House, flushing him out for Yes Man inside the Lucky 38, and Side Bets is a quest that requires the player to quote-unquote formally meet a leader of every faction. What this means is the player must have some form of interaction, one way or another, with the main factions of the game, being that of the White Glove Society, the Murders, the Brotherhood of Steel, the Great Khans, and the Boomers. Once you've formally met all these factions and replaced Mr. House, you can initiate the ending dam sequence of the game, which is a whole lot less than what is required in the other endings. This is primarily because Yes Man is a fail-safe ending that can't be failed. Unlike all the other faction leaders, Yes Man will always be revived upon being killed, as he is simply a program that can just be brought back. Anyways, with Rebcat meeting Mortimer in the White Glove Society, the game ticks off this faction and he is free to continue his speedrun. He then heads across the road to the Tops Casino, where he'll walk up to Benny, which completes the quest They Went That-A-Way, giving the player 1000 XP, fast-tracking Rebcat to level 4, which he then uses to level up his speech and survival. This gives him the ability to get the perk Black Widow and Travel Light. Black Widow will be useful in just about 2 seconds, but Travel Light gives the player an extra 10% movement speed when wearing light armor or no armor at all, which is obviously useful in a speedrun setting. The other perk, Black Widow, is instantly used to seduce Benny into having a formal meeting of his own, which then results in him dying. This then completes Ring-a-Ding-Ding, which again gives the player another 1000 XP, more speech skill, the Platinum Chip, and also access to Yes Man in Benny's suite. Here with Yes Man, we make sure to initiate the Wild Cards questline before leaving the Tops Casino altogether. It's worth noting here that Rebcat actively runs back through the entire casino. Then, with the Platinum Chip in hand, Rebcat heads straight over to the Lucky 38 to eliminate Mr. House. This is needed, like I mentioned prior, for the Yes Man quest Change in Management. With some basic 9mm shots, Mr. House is removed, and Rebcat is free to roam on over to the Grimora, where he simply enters, talks to the Grimora entrance guard, and leaves. For some weird reason, this is enough to satisfy the side bets requirement for the martyrs. Rebcat then leaves the strip, grabbing the fast travel location of the Freeside Gate, before fast traveling to Hidden Valley to formally meet the Brotherhood of Steel. It's worth noting here that we can engage in conversation with the Brotherhood of Steel, and this will satisfy the side bets requirement, but doing so will trap us inside Hidden Valley, as the Brotherhood of Steel will place an explosive collar around our neck, forcing us to help them. So, to get around this potential time loss, Rebcat will just pickpocket one of the guards near the front, stealing the bunker key, before opening the exit and shooting at the Brotherhood of Steel, which obviously results in combat, which for some reason is enough to satisfy the side bets requirement for these power armor shut-ins. Then, Rebcat fast travels to Goodspring Cemetery, the location discovered at the start of the game, and heads straight north to Red Rock Canyon, which is needed for the Great Khans. You guessed it, another faction for Yes Man. Nothing of note happens here except the path taken is a bit rough and isn't exactly optimal. Once at Red Rock Canyon, you can pretty much just fast travel away and head on back to Freeside, where Rebcat leaves and heads straight northeast once more. Here lies the final faction of the run, the Boomers, which are located in the top right corner of the map. Famously known, the boomers have a barrage of explosives that ward off any oncoming personnel, so Rebcat has to keep that in mind while waltzing his way over. Eventually, after surviving the harsh treatment, you're greeted by some boomer guards who escort you to Pearl, where we converse and simply leave, as that again satisfies the final faction requirement of this run. With every faction formally met, Rebcat heads back to the strip, where he moves Yes Man into the Lucky 38 to finally replace Mr. House, where eventually there's a long cutscene involving some Securitrons, which Rebcat casually sits through. Then he goes and turns on the power at a local substation. If you've been paying attention, you'll remember this substation from before in the run, near Black Mountain, the location Rebcat already discovered. When he enters, he turns on the power, leaves, and heads straight back to Yes Man once again, before being transported to the dam for the final section of the run. This is the ending of the game. The NCR and the Legion are openly in combat with one another, and Rebcat is tasked with navigating this dam, which is filled to the brim with high-level enemies with some pretty dangerous weaponry. Running straight into the internal parts of the dam itself, he speech checks past an NCR guard before hacking a set of terminals and inserting Yes Man into the computer network situated within the dam. Some explosions follow, he leaves through the eastern side, and heads straight to the final camp of Legate Lanius. Legate Lanius is by far one of the strongest human NPCs in the game. He has an exaggerated health pool of 920 and a base damage threshold of 19. He's a tough cookie to beat in a one-on-one combat, which is unfortunate because he's surrounded by his lackeys, who are also pretty damn strong too. Simply put, Rebcat is incredibly underleveled and underarmed for this conflict, so instead, he uses that 100 speech that was obtained during the run to speech check aside Lanius and finally finish the game. After all that is said and done, Rebcat was able to finish Fallout New Vegas in 37 minutes and 52 seconds. Yes, a slower time that Striker claimed to have achieved 17 months prior, but this record was legit and had video proof. This is what the New Vegas community truly considers as the first record of New Vegas any percent. Rebcat is where this story begins. This run wasn't exactly groundbreaking. There was a lot of mistakes, a few hiccups here and there, and time lost throughout the entire run. I mean, this guy still had combat animations on, so every time he got a kill, he would just lose 2 to 3 seconds. It wasn't exactly the cleanest execution, but it was a very respectable start for the speedrunning scene. But this speedrunning scene wouldn't realistically take off for another couple of years. See, what's worth noting about speedrunning in the early 2010s is that events like Games Done Quick and ESA were still getting started. Most of the games ran at these events were, to be honest, in the early days, console games, or more specifically, retro console games. And with the speedrunning scene of Fallout New Vegas being primarily on PC, the speedrunning scene just went undercover. It was really just forgotten. To put it into some perspective, New Vegas was first ran at a major speedrunning event in 2017, 7 years after the game's release. However, this early 2010s period was still fruitful in discoveries. Despite being a small speedrunning community, what was there was a group of dedicated gamers who were set on finishing New Vegas as fast as possible. The community was essentially 3 to 4 people using the Speed Demos archive forums as an active chat to relay their best times and new strategies. Quick footnote, Speed Demos archive was the old place to go when learning or discovering speedrunning. Essentially, in New Vegas' case, it was just a 14-page long forum that was filled to the brim with early developments. The forums weren't exactly the best place to have constructive conversations, but back in the day you had to work with what you had. After Rebcat's initial run of 37 minutes and 52 seconds, there wasn't much in the space of new world records for around 18 months. No one was essentially running the game. There was an active community for New Vegas speedrunning, but a majority of the people involved were either just messing around most of the time, or just didn't bother running the game much. In early December of 2013, a new runner called Rydo would pick up New Vegas speedrunning and would take to it pretty efficiently. He was able to achieve a 34 minute and 46 second PB on the 12th of December 2013 without even using quick save quick loading to skip dialogue. Another small tangent here, due to some old ruling with the New Vegas speedruns, every run had to be single segment on the SDA boards, meaning no saves could be loaded throughout the run. This is important because that quick save quick loading done before to skip dialogue was not available to Rydo, and he was still able to beat Rebcat's world record by over 3 minutes. Unfortunately, a lot of the old SDA world records have been lost to time, so there is no surviving evidence for these runs. However, just 8 days later after this world record, one discovery would resurrect the speedrunning scene of Fallout New Vegas, and would start to slowly raise the skill ceiling needed to obtain a world record. It's the 20th of December 2013. A new world record is submitted to the board by Rydo. It's only around 18 seconds faster than the previous obtained world record, but Rydo leaves a pretty big list under the world record claim with an updated route. Hidden amongst these notes is a small find left at the bottom that reads pretty much as follows. I entered the dam, and there's a little discovery I did. You can jump into the water, following the barrage to a small piece of land with a rock that is somewhat climbable. Jumping into the rock's face and sidestepping around is pretty hard to do, especially with low FPS, but it can save around 45 seconds to a minute. What Rydo had found was called rock skip, and what it did was completely remove the internal section of the dam that runners had done previously. No more hacking and blowing open the exits, instead you jumped off into the water, swam along, and then performed a well-timed jump to reach Legate Lanius' gate. As Rydo becomes better at performing rock skip, he is able to get his record down to a 34 minute and 2 second PB, before putting in some serious grind in the early days of February 2014, where he eventually got a 32 minute and 56 second world record. Again, no new tricks or exploits, just one person becoming better at the game and becoming better at rock skip in general. Over the next 3 to 4 months, a bunch of new runners are slowly making their way into the New Vegas speedrun forum, all discovering small details that would eventually lead to a new ruling for the run. On the 4th of February 2014, it was discovered that the player's FPS would affect movement speed, meaning that the player with over 60 FPS would run at a considerably higher speed. You probably heard about it. It's the exact same bug that made it all the way into Fallout 76.
Down to the ground, I run faster. Oh, hold on. See, I'm running like this because I'm loading all this shit. Watch this. Look down on the ground, but gotta go.
Yeah, that existed in Fallout New Vegas. Anyways, a rule was placed that the player's FPS would need to now be capped at 60 FPS, which obviously helped level out the leaderboard somewhat. It was also discovered that Travel Light, the perk that increased movement speed by 10%, could consistently be kept through saves if you didn't reset your game. So resetting your game in between runs was also mandatory too. This is also around the time that Natachi, a Twitch streamer who had a deep love for the Fallout games, discovered New Vegas speedrunning and would decide to pick it up. However, he would ultimately decide to utilize quick save quick loading to skip a bunch of dialogue in the game, which did go against the single segment SDA ruling at the time, but I personally don't think this takes away from his run at all. The single segment rule was and always will be a stupid rule. Natachi would livestream his events to a pretty substantial audience, and his runs are actually still archived up until this day, which is pretty awesome. For a lot of the runners though at the time, the biggest hurdle was definitely the final trick of rock skip, which took a lot of skill to pull off. You had to jump off the peak of this tiny rock on the ground, hitting face first into the giant rock's face in front of you. Before landing on the rock's face, the player would need to release the W key to land flush, before hopping sideways around the rock. Rock skip is not an easy trick to perform, and it can definitely weigh on you throughout an entire run when you're on some good pace, as you know it all comes down to your final execution of just one trick. This is precisely what happened to Natachi on the 17th of February 2014. His run just kept getting better. Before he knew it, he was a staggering 22 seconds ahead of his PB, putting him 17 seconds ahead of the world record. A small cushion, sure, but time can evade you pretty fast when it comes to performing rock skip.
No, I didn't get that one, that's fine. That's okay, that's okay. I still did it very quickly. I didn't lose a whole lot of time on that.
With rock skip conquered, he ran straight to Legate Lanius, convinced him to spare the fight, confronted General Lee Oliver, and clocked in a new world record at 32 minutes and 45 seconds. Natachi is pretty strong proof that anyone with a passion and appreciation for a game can learn to speedrun it if they have the time to do so.
And so the cheated death in the cemetery outside Goodsprings cheated death once again. and the Mojave Wasteland was forever changed.
He had been running the game for less than a week, and he already had the world record. But what's more important than that is that Natachi was doing it live on Twitch to an audience of onlookers who could all be intrigued and impressed by his sheer display of skill and determination. With this newfound confidence, it wouldn't take him long to beat this time, setting a new world record just 3 days later of 32 minutes and 27 seconds, before beating it again the next day on the 21st of February, achieving a 32 minute and 3 second world record. And one of those viewers sitting there watching him bask in his glory was Rydo, the previous world record holder who discovered rockskip. Forced to watch his world record be taken live, Rydo would return to the drawing board and he would reevaluate his stance on single segment runs that wouldn't involve quick save quick loading to skip dialogue, and instead decided to incorporate it into his arsenal of tricks and exploits. And it was here, roughly 1 month later, that Rydo was able to be the first New Vegas runner to break the 32-minute barrier, getting a 31-minute and 41-second PB on the 18th of March, 2014. And this run was somewhat legendary. Rydo managed to avoid a whole bunch of NPCs that usually engage in conversation with the player, saving precious seconds here and there, alongside some really good lines in a first try rockskip. He was able to forge a seemingly perfect run. His 31-minute and 41-second PB was extremely good. Unfortunately, this run was so good that no one actually stood to beat it for over an entire year. That's not to say that 2014 was just barren for the rest of the year though. A new runner named Kung Cobra would enter the scene and start finding small time saves here and there too. He would discover a consistent way to clip out of bounds within the White Glove Society, skipping that walk back through the casinos that runners used to do. And very akin to this, he would find 2 clips inside the Tops Casino that would basically do the same, saving around 5 to 10 seconds each. But even with these pretty impressive time saves, Rydo's sub 32-minute run was just that good. Natachi had moved on as fast as he arrived, and this new runner, Kung Cobra, was taking his time discovering new tricks and learning the run. Rydo's sub 32-minute run could be seen relatively as the first firm world record of this early era. It stood against some strong competition, and it stood for a long time. But as you guys know, as the story usually goes, things don't stay firm forever. A new trick was on the horizon, and just like rockskip prior, it too would resurrect the New Vegas speedrunning scene. Now, the trick in question wasn't actually found in New Vegas itself. No, this trick was found in Fallout 3. See, both games have relatively similar engines, and they seem to function pretty much the same, at least when it comes to stuff like collision and player-based movement speed. So in May 2015, Rexy, a runner who was doing some casual all-bobblehead runs at the time, forgot the bobblehead within Raven Rock. For people that don't know, once you leave Raven Rock, you're locked out of it forever, and it's one of the free bobbleheads that the player can actually soft-lock themselves out of collecting.
Oh shit.
Rexy had no choice but to turn back and collect it. As they turned around into the President Eden room and dropped down over the ledge, this happened.
This could be really stupid. Whoa, what? Holy shit. Did I find a new glitch?
It may not look like much, but Rexy had unknowingly produced one of the most game-changing glitches in both Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas. This was the discovery of Speed Cripple. Speed Cripple is a glitch that allows the player to overlap both normal movement speed and cripple movement speed, which results in the player running at around 160% total movement speed. This is a lot of speed, especially when you're running across the Mojave for around 30 whole minutes. If I was to rank Speed Cripple on a list of most impactful New Vegas discoveries, at least when it comes to speedrunning, I'd rank it around 3rd most impactful. It really changed the early scene of New Vegas speedrunning, and would also result in some wild discoveries down the line that wouldn't have been possible without Speed Cripple. Obviously, this trick was doable in both Fallout 3 and New Vegas, so it wouldn't be long before someone took the opportunity to use this trick to gain a new world record. That's right, it was the Cobra's time to strike. So, Speed Cripple can be obtained through a plethora of methods, with the main goal of performing the trick being that of crippling the player's legs and reloading the game within a small, roughly 6-frame window. What makes this trick hard is that this 6-frame window isn't exactly consistent, and sometimes can be a bit fucky with the player. So usually having a way to reset your speed cripple attempts swiftly is obviously going to be so much smoother. In Fallout 3, speed cripple is obtained by throwing yourself off the nearest cliff right outside of Vault 101. That's because this is the fastest way of crippling the player's legs, and it's not a bad strat, so to speak. It's fast and efficient. But New Vegas? New Vegas has something Fallout 3 doesn't. Pre-order DLCs. With the installation of the Mercenary Pack, the players provided some lightweight metal armor and, most importantly, a mercenary's grenade rifle. Upon leaving Doc Mitchell's home, you can simply bind the grenade rifle to your hotkeys and shoot the ground. The first shot usually isn't enough to cripple the player's legs, but the second shot really should, meaning all you had to do now is quick save quick load within that 6-frame window and just hope you get lucky. This is exactly what Kung Cobra did. He left Doc Mitchell and set about being the first runner to obtain speed cripple in an any % speedrun. He lined up the first grenade shot to soften his legs, before firing the grenade launcher once again, failing to get speed cripple. It took him a total of 55 seconds to get speed cripple, taking a whopping 9 attempts. But even then, with this major setback, he was primed and ready to beat the world record. The trip to the strip went fine. Factions went fine. He even opted not to go for rock skip in the final dam section, which, like we discussed prior, saves around 45 seconds. Instead, he ran through the dam and did the old setup that loses quite a lot of time. But even then, Kung still managed to beat Rydo's sub 32-minute run by around 3.5 minutes, getting a 28:17 world record on the 31st of May 2015. In his closing speech, Kung even addressed Rydo about him potentially beating this time and using the Mercenary Pack DLC.
28:17 is good enough. It's not cheating, it's just I had a DLC. No rules against having DLCs on.
See, Rydo was not a fan of the fact that a pre-order DLC was needed for the run. Not only did this requirement of money being spent on the DLC seem like a slap in the face to Rydo, but the idea of starting a game with new items instead of starting fresh was also seen as somewhat disrespectful. But here's the thing, New Vegas is ran on PC, meaning that if a person wanted to, which I obviously do not endorse, they could just download the Mercenary Pack file and place it into their own data file for free. And when it comes to starting a new run with the grenade launcher, well, the alternative doesn't exactly sound appealing, which is to either use dynamite to perfectly time a quick save quick load, or to throw yourself off a cliff like they do in Fallout 3. Kung claimed he wouldn't try to beat this PB and would leave that role to Rydo, with the official ruling for New Vegas any % being that the Mercenary Pack DLC was allowed. It did take Rydo a while to come around to running New Vegas this way, as he did eventually decide to push his pride aside for the sweet chance of getting back his world record. I'm just kidding, Rydo didn't do that. Instead, he opted to perform what we call cliff cripple, which is the same method, like I said, used in Fallout 3 to get speed cripple, by throwing himself off a cliff and quick save quick loading as he hit the ground. I actually really respect this about Rydo. He had a dislike for a certain rule set and would sacrifice around 30 seconds in time loss just to prove a point. I don't exactly agree with that point, and I certainly think he's putting his position at risk for protesting it, but I do respect it nonetheless. One day, Rydo was doing some offline attempts, with his splits claiming he'd already beaten Kung's world record. With his PB cresting atop a 27-minute run, Rydo was aiming to beat that 27-minute barrier, and with a 4th attempt speed cripple, it was on. He managed to make his way to the strip through Camper Karen roughly 4 seconds ahead of his PB before doing the usual, entering the various casinos, killing Benny, and meeting the factions. Another side note again is that Rydo still refused to do the out of bounds reset clips that Kung had discovered, giving up around another 20 seconds of speedrun time to basically nothing. He killed Mr. House and left Freeside, being roughly 3 seconds ahead, putting him at a perfect sub 27-minute pace. He met the Boomers, Khans, and Brotherhood Steel, he powered the strip, and entered the dam on a solid gold split, placing him a whopping 11 seconds ahead of this hidden world record. Again, just to reiterate, as far as anyone knew at this time, the current world record was still held by Kung Cobra, and it was 28 minutes and 17 seconds. If Rydo got rock skip first try, he could smash this by over a minute. Now was the time for Rydo to show he had mastered the trick he discovered. It may not look crazy, but this was one of the smoothest rock skips anyone had ever performed. whilst on golden pace, which had never been seen before. This was it. All he had to do was speak to Leggett Lanius and General Lee Oliver, and the world record was his. Eventually clocking in on the 5th of June 2015 with a 26-minute and 32-second world record, smashing the previously held world record by over 100 seconds. Rydo had reclaimed his world record once again, sacrificing time left, right, and center for what could be explained as nothing more than internal morals. He still held the record atop the leaderboards, and it was clear no one was going to stop him anytime soon. Roughly 3 weeks after this, a new software for timing speedruns was released called LiveSplit, which is the most modern timing method used by runners today. This was huge for one fact. LiveSplit was able to detect the program of Fallout New Vegas, and seemingly overnight a load remover was made, meaning that all those unfair advantages of having a fast SSD and a good computer had basically been removed. I haven't mentioned this yet, but up until this point, all of the runs were done RTA, which basically means real-time attack, meaning that loads were included in the run. If someone had a bad PC or a really terrible hard drive, they would naturally lose minutes over someone with an SSD, so the playing field would be leveled by just simply having a load remover which removed the loading screens, which only counted the in-game time. A runner by the name of Raw Cruz was fortunately grinding Fallout New Vegas 80% at the time that the new load remover was published, and he took advantage of this new official timing method to slot themselves permanently into the record books. It was a huge leap in time, with Raw Cruz obtaining a 23-minute and 57-second world record. Now this is a pretty big jump in time, around about 2.5 minutes to be precise, but it does make sense when you think about it. You've taken all of the loading screens from an entire session of Fallout New Vegas and just removed them from a run. This does affect the final times. In fact, it does quite a lot. You could make an argument that all runs before the inclusion of LiveSplit had a somewhat inconsistent timing method to them, and that would be generally correct, but you can say for sure that after the inclusion of LiveSplit, that every single run was on a consistent timing method. Seemingly overnight, like I said, the playing field had been leveled, and a lot of the runners who thought they weren't as fast as others had slowly realized that they were just right behind them. The world record hunt had finally been activated, and this was, in some ways, the birth of a new speedrun era. It slowly became obvious that if Rydo wanted to get his record back, he would have to change his mindset around the use of certain glitches. As only 9 days later though, Rydo would beat this record once again. Like I mentioned, he did cave in and eventually used the grenade launcher strat for speed cripple, obtaining it around 2 minutes and 18 seconds into the run, which is a pretty good time. Rydo had perfected his movement and even opted to do the previously discussed out-of-bounds strats for inside the casinos. It was fairly obvious he was going all out. This was another attempt at setting a record that wouldn't be beaten. He was trying to top the leaderboards and stay there again for an entire year, like he did back in March 2014. He was comparing against his old PB without the load remover, which actually gives us a pretty huge indication of just how much loading times were in a full New Vegas run. Entering the dam, Rydo was 3 minutes and 23 seconds ahead of his old PB, slotting himself 58 seconds ahead of Raw's current world record. With a rare slip up at the rock skip, but otherwise perfect execution, Rydo finished his run with Leggett Lanius and General Lee Oliver before handing it in for a sub 23-minute run. A 22-minute and 58-second world record. He had put it all on the line, perfecting every little trick and including every minor time save. This was in some ways Rydo's magnum opus. It was also his last run ever, claiming in the comment section of the video that this run could be improved by 10 to 12 seconds, but he was done running New Vegas. You've obviously heard this before, and most of the time it is just fiction. Runners will always say that they're done running a game, and eventually will come back when their records are beaten. But no, Rydo had handed in his last run. This truly was the end of the Rydo era. He had held the record for so long, setting stunner after stunner atop the boards. To a lot of people, Rydo was the reason why they ran this game. Roughly a month later, a small new discovery was made. The Italian voice files for Fallout New Vegas were actually deemed the fastest in comparison.
Vieni da un paio di giorni di incoscienza.
Up until now, all the runs were done in English, but now Italian was seen to be somewhat faster. Overall, it saved around 10 seconds, which isn't an insane amount, but still worth the file change. This was mainly seen at the basement section, where Yes Man would discuss the Securitron details with the player. Using the Italian voice files, Kung was able to get a 22-minute and 46-second world record on the 20th of November 2015, just over a month after Rydo's glorious PB. You might be surprised by this, but actually it makes quite some sense. The inclusion of a load remover did actually level the playing field, like I said. Runners were finally able to compare against one another on a fair basis. Kung Cobra was seen to be slower than Rydo before the load remover, but with the inclusion, he actually wasn't too far off. It had unknowingly set a false bias in the speedrunning community, and with all that gone and loading times removed, the true speedrun capabilities of certain community members were plain to see. Kung Cobra was actually really good at speedrunning Fallout New Vegas, and soon he would slowly dominate the leaderboards, just like Rydo did before him. It may not seem like much, but this 2246 does actually start off the revolution of Fallout New Vegas speedruns, as over the next couple of months, the speedrunning scene would begin to flourish. A new runner named Swags the Dog would come to the scene and would get the world record just a week later with a 22-minute and 34-second PB. There wasn't anything groundbreaking about this run, it was just somewhat cleaner and better than Kung Cobra's previous world record. But Kung Cobra would fire back just 2 days later with a 22:12 of his own, until roughly 2 weeks later after this world record, when a new discovery was found yet again. See, the basement section of the New Vegas 80% run was a huge block of just standing still, around 1 minute and 31 seconds to be precise. In a run just over 22 minutes, this was quite a big chunk of time, and eventually Kung Cobra was able to finally find a way to skip it. By quick save quick loading to skip Yes Man's dialogue and then waiting an hour each time, the game would skip forward to the next line of dialogue. It's a little unorthodox, sure, but it did the job. A very simple trick to perform, and would save around 45 to 50 seconds on average. The one downside is the time save from the Italian voice files were basically reduced from 10 seconds to around 5 seconds, but this was progress nonetheless. Kung, with his newfound knowledge, broke the 22-minute barrier, getting a 21-minute and 53-second PB. It was actually a pretty close one too. He got his leg re-crippled just before the rock skip, which usually means the run's dead due to losing speed cripple, but luck was on Kung's side and he was actually able to re-obtain speed cripple first try after dropping over the edge of the dam. His rock skip was also pretty bad too, but he did manage to crawl home and eventually set a new world record. Over the next Christmas holiday, 2 new strats were introduced into the final section of the run, both found by the, at the time, Fallout 3 world record holder Izunatan. Basically, Izunatan had found that not only could you skip rock skip by quick save quick loading through a small hitbox at the dam checkpoint, but Izuna also found that you can initiate dialogue with Legate Lanius at the end of the run without running up all the stairs at the back of his camp. Instead, you can step on this small ledge underneath where Lanius stands and just reach the hitbox to release him from his tent. Here, he will initiate dialogue with the player, saving around 3 to 4 seconds. Both Swags the Dog and Kung Cobra would fight back and forth over the claim of world's fastest New Vegas runner, with Swags the Dog officially having the fastest time come December 31st, sitting on a 20-minute and 38-second PB. You usually find this with speedrunning. When 2 fairly well-matched runners compete on a somewhat identical level, it becomes a fine balance between outdoing your opponent whilst also aiding them in their quest to be the best. Swags the Dog and Kung Cobra were pretty good friends, and would frequent each other's chats, assisting one another in pushing down the barrier more and more. In April 2016, another pretty amazing strat was found which helped push the New Vegas speedrun over the sub 20-minute barrier. A glitch called Time Stop was discovered, which involved the players spamming the map with a marker while simultaneously lowering their Pip-Boy. Doing so would lock any physical object in space except the player. You can do some pretty cool stuff with Time Stop, but in the matter of a New Vegas speedrun, runners could use various objects to climb up the side of walls and buildings. Now, instead of running through Camp McCarran and using the monorail from the internal structure, runners could head to the eastern side of McCarran and perform some funky physics exploits to land on the monorail itself, eventually scaling the monorail train and entering the strip without setting foot in Camp McCarran. See, the monorail train itself is always loaded in the outside map, meaning you don't have to do this long run around the Fiend's territory south of New Vegas anymore, saving around 30 seconds if executed perfectly. On April 14th, Kung would start using the monorail skip in runs and would attempt to beat the world record. See, Kung had developed an appreciation for broadcasting his speedrun attempts and would use this motivation to push the boundaries of New Vegas speedrunning whilst also finding the weirdest and strangest time saves. With a pretty bad monorail skip, the execution of a new out of bounds to murder Mr. House faster, some pretty ideal walking lines, a good basement, and a well-executed damn checkpoint clip, and early leg at Lanius, Kung was able to finally creep under 20 minutes. This run was not a good run, but it was a proof of concept in some regards. It involved a lot of new tech and also proved that monorail skip was a worthwhile venture. With some defined running, some good practice, and a lot of attempts, this run could easily be a sub 19 minute run, maybe even sub 18 minutes. But we'll never see that side of New Vegas, because on the 28th of April 2016, only 2 weeks later, a random Reddit user by the name of PMMe, a Steam key, posted a random find on the r/speedrun subreddit, claiming to have accidentally executed a burst of movement speed when reloading and de-equipping a weapon. Watching the video reveals this. This short burst of movement speed was pretty ridiculous, and if replicated could become a reliable source of movement. The trick itself would become to be known as reload dashing, and it is single-handedly the biggest exploit found in Fallout New Vegas, at least when it comes to speedrunning. Essentially what we know is that the player can stick themselves in an infinite reload animation if you're using a single feed reload weapon that reloads bullet by bullet or shell by shell. You could double press 2, the ammo swap button on PC, and cause the player to enter this infinite reload loop. Then, if you're walking forward, you can enter the Pip-Boy and remove the weapon, which causes the game to get confused due to the game knowing it's got to move the player forward whilst juggling 2 broken animations at once, and essentially spits the player out. I'm going to show a really detailed explanation by Captain Kid22 in case you're interested, but if not, that's the simplified version. It wouldn't be a day before runners were replicating the glitch pretty consistently. The trick itself had a very steep learning curve, with it being somewhat easy to perform but hard to master. To me personally, I do rank reload dashing as the most impactful discovery in New Vegas speedrunning. It would absolutely shape the future of the speedrun community, and it would blow open the skill ceiling required to obtain a world record. New Vegas was no longer a walking simulator. The same day that the trick was discovered, Kung Cobra would set a new world record, smashing the sub 19 minute barrier. This run is very crude, and it's obvious that Kung Cobra was getting used to reload dashing, as he would occasionally bounce off various objects, losing time here and there, and would also just perform the trick very slowly. But overall, it was again another proof of concept run that showed that reload dashing was a new form of movement for anyone that needed or wanted the world record. All that work and progress just squashed in about a couple of hours. It was surreal to see. Kung got an 18:55 run, followed by a 17:57, and then a 17-minute 35-second world record, all in one night. For a while after reload dashing was found, runners would try to combine reload dashing and speed cripple to get the maximum movement speed possible. This resulted in certain sections not being reload dashed, like the inside of the strip, which was incredibly slow and a general loss of time. Eventually, runners would catch on to reload dashing and would ditch the idea of doing speed cripple altogether. This resulted in a more heavy focus on reload dashing as the sole form of movement speed, and eventually the world record would just get pushed further and further. When a new piece of tech is introduced like this, it can really blow up the potential of a certain speed game. Instead of having a 20-minute run with a pristine execution and set-in-stone movement, you instead have this free-flowing run with unknown potential that almost anyone could capitalize on. The barrier for a perfect reload dash run was essentially a mystery. Sub 17 minutes? Sub 15 minutes? Maybe even a sub 10 minute run. The time save that reload dashing had over walking was hard to calculate. The only true way of knowing how far the run could be pushed was to sit back and watch, as the top runners at the time would push each other again further and further. By the end of May, the record was at 16 minutes and 25 seconds. June, 15 minutes and 26 seconds. August, 15 minutes and 11 seconds. By the end of September, it was 14 minutes and 54 seconds. The record was just being pushed faster and faster down, and this was all done and set by one runner, Kung Cobra, sat at the top of the New Vegas 80% leaderboards, pushing the time down month in and month out. By April 14th of 2017, exactly 1 year after the discovery of Monorail skip, and roughly 1 year after the discovery of reload dashing, the world record was set at 14 minutes and 16 seconds. By, again, you guessed it, Kung Cobra. The run had reached a point where every dash was preset. You'd dash in a specific direction and length to avoid objects and various knockups that could occur when the player collided whilst performing a single reload dash. Kung had the run down to perfection. It took Fallout New Vegas just over 5 years to reach sub 20 minutes, and it had been pushed a further 5 minutes in just 1 year. Like I said before, the skill ceiling of the New Vegas run had been blown wide open. Around somewhere in March 2017, a new form of tech is discovered that is fixated around reload dashing. Before, when reload dashing, the player would double press 2 to initiate the infinite reload animation, walk forward, and spam their inventory button, which is usually F2. What would then happen is the inventory screen would pop up in front of the player and they would de-equip the weapon of choice before lowering the Pip-Boy and being shot forward. However, the opening of the Pip-Boy itself during the reload dash was weird. It wasn't exactly a consistent trick. Sometimes the game would reload 1 bullet in the infinite dash reload animation, sometimes it was 2, maybe 3 or even 4, and sometimes runners would catch themselves spamming F2 to get the Pip-Boy to open up earlier, which is, for obvious reasons, not only inconsistent, but like I said, bad for the hands too. Well, it was discovered that whilst performing a reload dash after pressing F2 to bring up the Pip-Boy, if you pressed the main attack button, being left click for most players, the game would instantly lower the weapon as it was starting a new animation, the firing animation, and would subsequently open the Pip-Boy as the animation for the Pip-Boy was queued up first before the player pressed F2 and then fire. What resulted was an interrupted reload dash, which saved around half a second over a traditional reload dash. You could actually perform this interrupted reload dash so fast that the game barely even starts the initial reload animation. This was a huge find. Let's be generous here and say that the run has around 50 individual reload dashes, and you can immediately see how this trick would save a huge chunk of time over the course of the run. With interrupted reload dashing in his back pocket, Kung could achieve a 13 minute and 45 second world record on May the 2nd. This run was deemed quote-unquote
I didn't even get sub 2 Doc
Quando
Mitchell.
si estinsero gli incendi, New Vegas
This
rimase in
fucking
piedi
trash.
assumendo il suo ruolo.
but either way, it was again a new world record. Interrupting the reload dash became the new norm, and once again the record was pushed further and further, with it eventually resting at 13 minutes and 30 seconds on the 28th of June 2017. Around this time, an unfortunate discovery was found to do with Benny inside the Tops Casino. No longer would we have sexual intercourse with Benny, as it was deemed faster to just shoot him and then walk away. This was faster because you could avoid all that pesky time loss from conversing with Benny, opting to instead, again, murder him and make a hasty exit. With all this being said, the next minute barrier was the 13-minute barrier, and through the course of live streaming his attempts, Kung would begin his grind once again. In the middle of August 2017, Kung had came close to getting a sub 13-minute run twice, with both runs ending at 13:06 and 13:04 respectively. It was basically a matter of time before he'd eventually knock down the barrier, and on the 26th of September 2017, he got this run.
Sei sveglio. Non male, eh?
After a pristine introduction at Doc Mitchell's house, followed by a few splits of time save, Kung was scraping the barrel. He decided to implement a new time save for the finale of the run after speaking with Leggett Lanius, where he would line up a perfect reload dash to skip over the gate at the end of the fort and converse with General Lee Oliver faster.
Caesar on the cross.
See, General Lee Oliver would walk towards the player after initiating the final explosion near the exit of the Legion's camp. This walking section took quite some time, but it had been discovered that by reload dashing on a perfect line after Lanius, the player could land on the opposite side of the fence and converse with Oliver much faster. All Kung had to do was land this one trick.
Of course.
Caesar ain't.
It took a bit of work, but he eventually got there. Eventually, he did lose time on the final split, but he did set a new world record at 12 minutes and 47 seconds, smashing that sub 13-minute barrier. To a lot of people, myself included, the 2016 to 2018 era of reload-speedruns was seen as the golden era of Fallout speedrunning. Not New Vegas speedrunning, but Fallout altogether. Each passing record would impress new viewers, bring in new runners, and would showcase off the incredible progress the speedrunning community around New Vegas had accomplished. I mean, sure, it's easy to look at this leaderboard and see that Kung Cobra had every world record in 2016 and 2017. But that doesn't mean that the New Vegas speedrun community was small or easy by any means. In fact, the New Vegas speedrun community was pretty well sized, at least to the point where GDQ showcased off a New Vegas speedrun in 2017. With this run came a new influx of runners, which would eventually mark the downfall of Kung Cobra's reign as the sole world record holder. 22 months he sat atop the leaderboards, and a new runner would seemingly come out of nowhere with a better time, beating Kung by over 5 seconds. This runner was named Sharo. For people who don't know who Sharo is essentially what we call a lab monkey, a runner who does all his practice and speedruns offline at the lab, perfecting their art before casually dropping it off in front of an entire audience. He was learning and running New Vegas in the background whilst Kung was sitting atop the leaderboards. Prior to this, Sharo was a pretty well-renowned Sly Cooper runner, which is a speedrun that is pretty well known for being execution heavy. He had caught on to the buzz around New Vegas with all the records being beaten and the run being showcased at GDQ, and set his sights on the world record. On October the 2nd, 2017, Sharo would simply drop off his new world record on the speedrun.com leaderboards, boasting a 12-minute and 42-second PB. The biggest thing to extract from this run was that Sharo had accomplished what Kung had failed prior. He executed a perfect gate skip to General Lee Oliver, and this saved him a huge chunk of time.
Caesar ain't. Immagino che non sia un.
His run was really well executed, and it was obvious that Kung Cobra would have some fierce competition. Sharo wasn't just a random runner who used a new trick to obtain a fast and easy world record. No, his record would stand the test of time. The very next day, Kung beat it by 4 seconds with a final time of 12 minutes and 38 seconds. He got a perfect gate skip like Sharo prior, and returned back to his spot atop the leaderboards. Honestly, I remember this happening live and thinking to myself, man, we're about to witness two titans go at it, fighting back and forth for the world record. I mean, on one hand, we had a streamer who was being pushed by his community to stream attempts of his runs live and display them off to the world. He was known as the top dog and was the world record holder. Kung Cobra had a reputation to keep. And on the other hand, we had a lab monkey grinding at his workstation without the online pressure of streaming. His desire was also to be the best. But we didn't get that. At least not yet. Sharo would just disappear as fast as he arrived, and Kung's 12-minute and 38-second world record would sit atop of the boards for over 14 months. Anyways, when Sharo returned, he had his eyes set on Fallout 3's any percent initially. He did the usual, learn a game, grind it offline, and then drop off the world record to an unsuspecting community. Some people might dislike this, by the way, this whole lab monkey attitude of offline grinding to then show up with a world record, but I personally like it. No record is ever secure in a speedrun setting. Any day, any moment, someone could just step up and take it from you, and usually losing a record on the spot is encouragement in itself to push someone to perform better. Like with Kung Cobra prior, runners are motivated by competition, and this mindset of lurking in the shadows can do a whole lot to push people to being better. Anyways, after beating the Fallout 3 any% world record, Sharo immediately turned his sights on Fallout New Vegas and started grinding it once again. It wouldn't be long before he'd beat Kung's world record and reach a new height of 12 minutes and 17 seconds. And this time, Sharo wouldn't hold the world record for less than a day. No, Sharo would actually go on to hold the world record for a seemingly good amount of time. In fact, the 12:38 that Kung had achieved would be his last world record. Concobra would never get a world record in Fallout New Vegas any percent again. The era of the Cobra was evidently over. Weirdly enough, at this point, nobody was actually doing world record attempts. It would take a new discovery to push anyone to really run New Vegas any percent again, and like many times before, like the discovery of Speed Cripple and Reload Dash and various other tricks, something big was on the horizon. Whenever a leaderboard sits dormant, something new is always ready to approach. On the 3rd of June 2019, a New Vegas runner by the name of Besk was doing some bingo runs on his own, basically just doing a random assortment of quests as fast as he could. He was reload dashing around Novak when he unfortunately got knocked into the air. On the way down, he quick loaded a little bit too late to avoid dying from fall damage, and this is what happened. It may not look like much, but this was the discovery of a new form of reload dashing. If you look carefully, you can see that Besk dashes for longer than usual. Every time he comes in contact with the ground, he gains an extra boost of movement speed, resulting in a longer dash. The community immediately banded together to discuss exactly what happened, and it wasn't even 24 hours before the code was cracked. Behold, the introduction of infinite dashing. This trick is performed by obtaining Speed Cripple at the same time you produce a reload dash. What results is the game confuses the animations of both reload dashing and the crippled state of Speed Cripple, and just constantly applies a burst of speed every time the player's momentum is reset or updated. This happens whenever the player touches the ground or is reloaded into existence, meaning you can quick save quick load to reset the burst of movement speed. What results is a consistent stream of movement that allows the player to essentially fly across the map. Long gone are the walking sections of New Vegas. I personally rank this as the second biggest discovery in Fallout New Vegas' speedrunning history, as yes, it does change the scope of the speedrun itself, but man, the impact of the initial reload dashing discovery was pretty much unprecedented. The next day after the proof of concept was posted on Twitter by Tomatoanus, roughly 48 hours after Besk had accidentally discovered the trick, Sharo would utilize reload dashing in a full run to obtain a new world record. This new run was a little shaky and it did take Sharo a couple of attempts to get the initial reload dash, but overall the time save was just incredible. A new route was subsequently also used, where the player would fly around the map of New Vegas, obtaining all essential fast travel points using infinite dash, before resetting their character and doing the following Yes Man quests as before, and eventually making it to the dam. The run was pretty much as follows: set up reload dash, infinite dash over to the Great Khans, discover Red Rock Canyon and fast travel back to Good Springs. From here they would head east to Hidden Valley, Black Mountain, the substation, discover Aerotech and then head north to the Boomers. Here they would end the infinite dash and converse with Pearl, before fast traveling to Aerotech and being able to reload dash their way into the Monorail. Any other sections of the run that weren't in the initial discovery process were basically the same as before. Runners would reload dash short distances within the strip and would then travel around inside casinos as per usual. Once at the dam, players would reload dash as usual to Leg Atlantis and then hand in the final quest before performing gate skip and finishing the game. Infinite dash would cut out all the traveling time from the run essentially, and would let the player discover all locations needed for the run in under 3 minutes and 40 seconds. It's around this time that Sharo had eventually warmed up to the idea of streaming his attempts on his Twitch channel, and had slowly let the old lab monkey mentality sliver away. He was now sharing his runs actively with the entire community as he ran them. Sharo would eventually get a time of 11 minutes and 31 seconds, before beating it again 2 days later with an 11 minute and 12 second PB. Before eventually achieving a sub 11 minute run on the 13th of June 2019. This run was pretty good. No wait, he beat it again the next day with a 10 minute and 32 second PB. One of the biggest changes in this run was instead of reload dashing through the final dam section before Leg Atlantis, Sharo would perform another infinite dash to skip the entire dam section. Now, the run needed 2 infinite dashes to get a world record, and that's not an easy task. I haven't even bothered to explain how hard infinite dashes are to perform, but they're really difficult. The timing is pretty precise, and it's not always guaranteed if you do time it correctly. Unfortunately, infinite dashing was a very inconsistent trick, and it really put off a lot of runners from even attempting New Vegas any percent. The fact that the world record now needed 2 of these in one run was staggering. Sharo's 10 minute and 32 second PB was groundbreaking, and it also came out on the same day that Tomato Anus, the guy who tweeted out the initial understanding of Infinite Dash, would make a speedrun explained on the new route, which resulted in a new wave of buzz around New Vegas any percent.
Hey guys, my name's Tomato Anus, the airbud of speedrunning, and this is an any percent speedrun of Fallout New Vegas. Recently, the biggest discovery in New Vegas in over 3 years occurred, which has allowed for about 90 seconds to be saved in the run.
Like the buzz from GDQ prior, this would have an effect on the standings of New Vegas any percent, but it wouldn't be felt for quite a bit of time. 11 more months pass and the leaderboards don't exactly change much, except the inclusion of one new runner, by the name of Wave Clipping. See, what's interesting about Wave Clipping was he started running in January of 2020, being one of the few runners to pick up the game post Infinite Dash. Not only that, he was actively pushing his time, which actually was fairly uncommon. A lot of new runners would arrive at the New Vegas any percent scene, learn the speedrun, and then drop it fairly fast because of Infinite Dash. But Wave Clipping wasn't doing that. By February, he had achieved a sub 15 minute PB, and by March it was sub 12 minutes. Wave Clipping had officially moved up at an alarming pace, and he was actively updating the community on his progress as it occurred. By the end of March, he had slotted into second place with an 11 minute and 10 second PB, putting him a whopping 38 seconds behind the world record. It was doable, within reach. Sharo could be beaten, and like I said before, it would come 11 months later. On the 14th of May 2020, roughly 4 months after he set his first PB, Wave Clipping was able to beat out Sharo with a 10 minute and 29 second world record. There was no new tricks, no new glitches, just a better executed run. Wave had finally toppled the beast atop the leaderboard, but like time and time again, like mentioned before in this exact video, once someone at the top loses their record, they always fight back. However, in Sharo's case, it's not exactly the same. Sharo is an extremely talented runner who can go weeks and weeks devoting every second awake to a speedrun of his choice. He'll drill the memory into his head until he becomes purely clinical in his execution, but this mindset cannot be forced. He'll always take months off from speedrunning to mentally reset or to focus on something else, and that's what he did with New Vegas. He waited and he waited until he was ready to get back on the horse, and eventually on the 2nd of December, later that year in 2020, Sharo would claim back the world record with an 8 second PB. Again, no new tricks or glitches, just a better executed run. Over the next couple of months, the speedrunning scene for New Vegas laid somewhat dormant, with the final trick of the run being discovered. This trick was the ability to momentarily drop height from infinite dashing without losing the infinite dash itself. This was important for discovering key locations like Red Rock Canyon and the substation, as the hitboxes for discovering these locations doesn't exactly extend into the sky. So if you're flying too high from an infinite dash, you'd originally have to spiral down until you hit the fast travel point. Now, instead, you can just drop down a tad and catch it much faster. With this new and final time save in mind, and a few minor reroutes to the leveling done in the run, Sharo was keen on getting the world's first sub 10 minute New Vegas run. Unlike before, he's constantly updating the Discord on his progress and sharing any new skips or discoveries he makes, regardless of how small. Offline, he gets a new world record of 10 minutes and 7 seconds. But only a week later, he got a new PB. Sharo would post a time to the speedrun.com leaderboards. Not only had he beaten 10 minutes, he had smashed it. He didn't get a 9:59, not a 9:57, 9:53? No, he had a 9 minute and 50 second PB. I could go over this run and recount the stuff he did, but again, it's just all better execution and smaller time saves. Sharo was fixated on being the first runner under 10 minutes, and honestly, he deserved it. This would be Sharo's last world record as of recording this video, but it's not where the final world record of New Vegas any percent stands today. No. In a cruel twist of events, the lab monkey got lab monkeyed. Wave Clipping had returned and had come back with a whopping new world record to boot. His time, a 9 minute and 36 second world record, achieved on the 15th of October in 2021, but he wasn't finished there. On the 21st of February 2022, he beat the world record again by 1 second, and again on the 14th of March 2022, he had whittled it down to 9 minutes and 31 seconds. The final barrier was a sub 9 minute and 30 second run. potentially the last mark on the New Vegas leaderboards, and it was achieved on the 26th of March, 2022. Wave Clipping had done it. He had achieved a 9-minute and 27-second world record, which is where the record stands today. When I asked Wave Clipping if he had any comments on his final run, he only had this to say: "While the run itself isn't perfect, I'm very proud of the time. It took a substantial amount of grinding to get there, with the biggest challenge being the second infinite dash at the dam and gate skip with Lee Oliver. The gap between first and second is somewhat big, but no one else has stepped up to the plate since. Like I mentioned prior, Wave Clipping was one of the few runners who actively stuck with the run after learning it post-infinite dash, and realistically speaking, Shiro was the only top runner who stuck around to run New Vegas any percent who was active prior to the discovery of Infinite Dash. A lot of runners agreed that Infinite Dash had raised the skill ceiling of New Vegas speedrunning, but because it was inconsistent and mandatory for a world record, it resulted in a lot of resets, which subsequently makes for a not-so-fun speedrunning experience. A lot of the shift and focus in recent years has moved towards glitchless New Vegas and the longer categories like all achievements. As relatively speaking, the runs either don't have Infinite Dash or don't feature it as prominently. This is actually a lot more common in speedrunning than people realize. Any percent will always be the fastest run, and that sometimes includes using glitches or strats that are generally disliked by almost every runner. The only alternative is to run something else or to stop running altogether. One of my favorite parts of making this video was getting in touch with the 3 prominent runners themselves, that being Kung Cobra, Sharo, and Wave Clipping. I asked all 3 runners if they had any thoughts on their time speedrunning New Vegas, and all 3 of them looked back at it fondly, which was obviously nice to see. A lot of friendships were made over this weird hobby of running a single-player game as fast as possible, and honestly that's what this is mostly about. Sure, this video has been mostly about the world record battle between runners, but under the surface, there was an entire community of individuals collectively working together to push the time down. Yes, Wave Clipping is the man on top right now, but realistically, he wouldn't be there without the hard work of Kung Cobra, Sharo, Rydo, or even Nitachi or Swags the Dog. The great finds of PM Mia Steamkey and Besk revolutionized the speedrunning scene, and the creative minds who ran the game were able to process together a functioning route in less than 24 hours. There is an entire community of streamers, runners, and even just casual viewers who helped make the current run possible, and this video would be amiss without mentioning that. And who knows? Maybe one of those big runners from the past might come back to seize the world record once more. Maybe there's another lab monkey, hiding, waiting, ready to beat that 9-minute and 27 record once and for all. Big thanks to all the following people for helping me make this video in so many different ways. All the names on screen were helpful in either scripting, editing, or producing this video, but a big thank you to both Kung Cobra and Tomato Anus for letting me use certain documentation surrounding the history of New Vegas any percent. Without them two, this video would not be possible. I know this was a big upload and the schedule has been a bit messy lately, but I've wanted to make this video for a long time now. Over a year actually, to be precise. And with the recent growth of my YouTube channel, I figured it was the right time to finally make it. As always, more content to come real soon. I'll be switching back to a 2 video to 3 video month upload now, so expect some more videos soon. Appreciate you guys watching. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.